I'm designing a guitar at the moment in 3 different layers, and it struck me just how much I've learned since the last episode I did on Rhino. So let's get back into it and unleash the tips and tricks. I did a video on my workflow in Rhino 3D for CAD. After using it for a while, I discovered some deeper layers and some awesome tricks to get the work done so much faster. So today I'll introduce you to those. Consider this an update to that older episode. So let's get started. Here we've got a very stripped down version of my Explorer. That outline in red is the edge of our top surface. I've had a lot of questions from people about how to do things like this, which would be a little thigh carve transition area. So to learn how to do it, let's go over to this side and do the belly carve, which I haven't done yet, and also show you my new favorite function, which I should have known all along, but I didn't. Right now I've selected the face of our body, which is very basic. It's a closed curve with, at this stage, a very rudimentary neck pocket. What I'd like to do is make sides for this body. I know how deep I want it to be. I want it to be 40 millimeters, which is the length of that line there. So if we click on our curve there and check that it's a closed curve, by right-clicking on it, selecting Object Properties, and there it will tell you. Sometimes it's a good idea to leave this window open so that you can just click on different things and see what their properties are. Alternately, if you keep your layers window open, it will show you also. We know that we want our body thickness to be 40 millimeters, but how do we achieve that without copying this red curve and then filling in between the 2 curves with a bunch of network surfaces? Well, apparently it's very easy. I've loaded a new tool into my toolbar called Extrude Straight. To learn how to do this, check out that episode in the description. So with our closed curve selected, I click on the Extrude Straight, and as I move my mouse, you can see the extrusion moves with it. Right now I'm in Z negative territory and I've just moved it into Z positive. So I want to go from the front to the back 40 millimeters. So I can just click on that end intersection of my line. And just like that, you've got some sides. So if I want to put a top on the guitar, I can click that curve again, go up to the surface menu and select planar curve, and pow, instant top. Now sometimes your top might be on a slight angle, so in cases like that, go to the surface menu again and try patch. Later on I'll show you what loft does as well. I don't need to keep this top, but it will work for the purposes of this demonstration. So if I select it and then go to my split tool, click that, then select my humbucker cavity as the cutting object and press enter, and you can see that the thin line turned into a thick one. So if I click that surface and hit delete, we have a lovely clean top. Now, in just the same way as we did this top with a planar surface, we can do one at the bottom of this humbucker cavity also. At the moment though, we don't have a curve down there to make one with. So let's make one. Let's head over to the toolbar and grab our Duplicate Edge tool. Once you have that enabled, just go into your cavity there and click around the edge that you would like to duplicate, as the name suggests. And then when you have a full set, either press enter or done. To close the curve, simply press the join tool. Check out the bottom left. We've got a problem, which is great because we can learn from it. We've got an open curve, that's confirmed by our object properties. Somewhere on a completely microscopic scale in here, we've got a section missing. I'm having a visual scan for it and can't see it, but that's okay because I've got a quick hack for that also. Under Curve Edit Tools in the Curve menu, select Close Curve. In both the bottom left-hand dialog and our Object Properties pane, this is verified. So if I drop another planar curve in there like I did before, we have the bottom of our humbucker cavity. I select that bottom and the sides, press Join, and we have an open polysurface. There's something else I want to show you in relation to joining. So if I select my open polysurface humbucker and the top of the guitar and go to this icon here, which I use to turn my grid display on and off. If I click grid display on and go to the units tab instead of the grid tab, I like to make sure that my absolute tolerance, relative tolerance, and angle tolerance are all 0.001. So I'm just going to enter that value into these two other fields now. So sometimes you want to join one thing to another. So in this example, our humbucker and cap. And in this case, it's going to work, but sometimes it doesn't. And so in that case, what we want to do is go to our absolute tolerance and take one of the zeros out. I've never found a situation where that didn't work, and although you've reduced the tolerance, it's at such a tiny level that when you're making guitars, it makes no difference whatsoever. Once I finish, I like to change it back, add the zero back in there, so that when I return to modeling, I can have a nice tight tolerance. Now let's work on those carved sections on the sides of the body. We're going to have to reshape our sides to allow access to these carved areas. So with the sides selected and clicking the split tool, using the thigh carve as a cutting object, we've got a split. I can select the bit that I don't want and hit delete, then select the thigh carve and the sides and join. Now we have a very tidy little thigh carve and the sides of our guitar and the face all modeled. Now it's time to construct our belly carve. So let's reproduce this red curve here. I'll delete it and we can start fresh. I have 4 available views: perspective, top, front, and right. And I would really like to see down from the back. I don't need to see from the right-hand side though, so I'm going to sacrifice that view. I go into right, click the view menu, down into set view and bottom. I've marked my curve position with these 3 points. I'll just move over into my perspective view so you can see what's going on. And I'm going to select this tool, which is Arc, Start, End, Point on Arc. And so, as the name suggests, we'll click the Start, the End, and the Point on Arc. So if I select that arc and go into our bottom view, we can see we've got that perfect start to our belly carve. The problem that most people have in this situation is, how do I do the curve on this irregular side here? I don't know if this is the recommended way, but I can say it definitely works for me. I go to my toolbar to my line tool, select that, and then at the end point intersection of the curve, click, and then find the opposite end of the end intersection and click again. Sometimes you may not have an end intersection to snap to. That's okay, just go up to your front view. If you look at the screen, you can see where my line starts there. I want a line going all the way to the other side. So if I hold down Shift, that will constrain the line to a nice 90-degree angle. And I'm going to click anywhere I like. Then I'll pop back into perspective view and repeat the process. So we've created a curve and two right angle lines from it that all connect perfectly to each other. And just to test that, I'm going to select all three, press join, and in the lower left we can see that we've connected them all successfully. I'm just going to quickly hit Command Z to unjoin them because I don't actually need them connected. I was just demonstrating. Now I reselect my two lines and hit split, and I'm going to use this curve that I left there before as my cutting object. Hit return, and now I can select both of those little legs and delete them neatly. So just to reiterate, we've got these two lines that we've just made that are exactly the length that we need, and they're snapping perfectly to our curve. Now that we know those red lines are dead straight, we're going to get a 3-point rectangle. And just as an aside, this might seem like a lot of work, but it actually isn't. Using this process, I can do all of this very quickly. I've snapped to the bottom of my first line and the end perpendicular intersection of the second, and this rectangle will snap to whatever's around. So in this case, I'm going to close the rectangle at this end point intersection. At this point, we should have our curve and our rectangle at a right angle to the curve. Now we select a line tool. I want to place it in the middle of the rectangle, so I'm just scanning, and there it is. And I want to attach it to the perpendicular midpoint. Now with the rectangle still selected, I'm going to surface planar curves. That gives us a planar surface to add geometry to. Just quickly delete that rectangular curve. Now we want to grab the same tool that we used before, arc, start, end, point on arc. We'll click here at our intersection and at our perpendicular intersection. Now on a Mac, which I am, if I hold down Control and then left drag the mouse, left click drag, it allows us to change our view within the perspective. So as we travel down that central line that we created before, we're trying to find the midpoint. And what we're finding instead is that the humbucker cavity is running interference. In this case, I can find the midpoint, but that's not always going to be the case, so let me show you a workaround. Just like before, we'll hold down Control, left click with our mouse until we find somewhere where there won't be any interference, like right there. Left click to place. I've put mine right in the middle, but you might like one that's more shallow or deep. It's really up to you. We finished with the plane, so we can delete it, and the line, delete it. Now we've created two curves, and if I select both and then press join, we can see that they are a closed curve. Command Z to undo because I was just testing again. Now I'm selecting the extrusion that we made before because that's what we want to cut into. So I've selected the split tool and I'm selecting the curve that we just made. So as I press enter, it makes the cut in the surface so that I can select the bit I don't want and hit delete. But we have a problem. It also made a cut on the opposite surface, which is something we absolutely don't want. It happened because we selected the entire extrusion, so if we check and see that we still have those two vertical lines from before, I can select the side of the extrusion, hit split, and then use those two lines that we left there as our cutting objects. Now we've successfully isolated this one panel. So with our panel selected, we hit split, use the curve as the cutting object, hit return, delete the curve because we no longer need that, and then delete the leftover panel. Now we just need a curve here, so we'll go to duplicate edge, click the edge, hit enter, and we've got it. Now that we finally have our two curves, I'm going to surface and loft. There are a bunch of settings in here, and I just use the ones on screen. I haven't changed them from the factory settings. And look how clean that is. A wise person at this point would save those curves to a separate layer and hide them. So now we've constructed both of our carved areas there. But I have to say, I don't like how messy this has become. We've got our extruded sides and then we've got that one panel right there. Sure, I could rejoin them, but I'd much rather have one nice, clean, continuous outline. So I make the selection you can see in red and hit explode to separate all of those different pieces. I then press Command and click on this curve here to deselect it. Now I can hit delete. I'm left with a bit of leftover geometry, so I'm just going to clean that up quickly. And in order to remake our sides, I just select our outline, go back to Extrude Curve, and if I zoom in, I'm going to click on this nice little intersection. Now I can select the entire extrusion and then move over to split again, select my curve that I left behind there and the one I left on the other side as my cutting objects. Hit enter, and now I can delete the bits that I don't want. Now I select the bits that I do want, head over to join, and they're all connected, just like all the people and trees and animals and plants in the world, and rocks and water and gases, and maybe ghosts. I'm not sure about those. To put it back on this, I'm going to select duplicate edge again. We'll miss that curve because we already have that curve there. We'll run around the guitar, miss that curve, do that, hit enter, and then join. Now if we look in our bottom left dialog, we can see we've got 3 open curves where we should only have 2. That means we've got a piece missing. To find it, I'm clicking on this curve at random. It could easily be the other one, but we'll start here. And I can see that that's where the piece is missing because the red suddenly stops and then we've got that curve there. Can you see it? So when I move into position and use the duplicate edges tool, hit enter and then select the curves around it, I can join them and we're all good. On the finished model, I wouldn't actually leave that little edge there, but for the purpose of our tutorial, it's all good. I'm just selecting all of my curves now. I can hit join and we have a closed curve. If we go to surface and planar curve, we should be able to close the curve, but it won't let us. Even though the curve is closed, it's not completely flat across its plane. Now, I learned quite a long time ago not to get too super anal as a CNC machinist, because even though we have the technology to zoom in on any particular point to just such a ridiculous degree and then obsess over it, these small areas would be rounded over by sandpaper or files, so I really don't cry when I get results like this. So let's flatten out our curve. What I want to do is go to my top view and then select a 2-point rectangle and just roughly click outside the area of the body, select it, go to surface planar curve, and then delete the original curves. That's created a planar surface on our C-plane. Now I select our disobedient curve and type into the keyboard PROJ. That brings up our option to project to our C-plane. We want to select delete input objects because our input objects are bad. So as I click yes, it's projected our curve to the C-plane and now it's perfectly flat. That means we can use the curve, but first we have to put it back where it was before. What we learned earlier from when we originally made the curve was that this area here doesn't culminate in a sharp point, but this area over here does. So to move the curve into position, I can select it and click move, click my sharp point, and then click again at the perpendicular point. For an absolutely precise method of doing it, you can select your curve and click move, click your sharp point, and I'm typing in 40, hitting return, and holding down control. And what that means is it's constraining the curve at 40 millimeters from the origin point. When I'm ready, left click to place. We don't need our C-plane guide anymore, so we can delete it. Now we've repaired that curve, I can select it, go to Surface Planar Curve, and we've got it. So now I can select that back, and then select literally anywhere else on the guitar because it's already all joined together. Head over to Join, click it, and we've got one open polysurface. I was told when I first started learning about this stuff that you always want to have your polysurfaces closed, but because I do my cam operations in Fusion 360, Fusion selects areas like this even if they are all joined together. So in my experience, in my workflow, it really doesn't matter. Regardless of how I do things though, this is to teach you the correct ways of doing things. So let's pretend that we're finished with this body even though it doesn't have a heel joint or volume potholes or anything like that. And we'll close the polysurface. I can't visually see any of the leaks, so let's try something else. So I've selected our polysurface, and you can either add this icon, Show Edges, to your toolbar, or if you only use it occasionally, you can just type Show Edges, all one word, like this. It should be highlighted, so just select it by pressing Enter, and you'll get this dialog box and it shows my edges in a horrible purple color. Those are edges that are unjoined. I've placed a Join Edges icon in my toolbar. I click it, and if I zoom in to this part here, we can see where the unjoined edge starts. I click on it, and you can see in this case it's brought up a menu. This is the top edge and this is the side. So you can click either one and then go back and click the line again to select the other one. Hit yes and it's all joined up. Now I'll do the others. When you're busy modeling, sometimes you can be left with a lot of junk like this. This is the stuff I don't want, and in red is the stuff that I do. So a quick selection hack is to select the stuff I do want and then hide it. Then go over to this icon here and swap hidden invisible objects. That means you can work on the area that you like without all the clutter. Another big workflow time saver is the mirror tool. Here I've drawn half of a humbucker cavity, so if I go to the mirror tool, click one end of it and then click the other, and then select the second curve and join them together, we have a closed curve. When you're prototyping, you have to juggle a lot of values, make things bigger and smaller. So if our humbucker cavity in this instance was too small and we wanted to enlarge it, we'd move over to the offset tool here. You can see in the distance field up on the left that you can change that value, and our value is 0.5, so I'm going on the outside direction. You can go on the inside if you like. Hit enter and there's a perfect offset. Here's one last problem. I've got a curve here and it's a closed curve, but unfortunately it's also a self-intersecting curve. That means that one curve component and another curve component are overlapping somewhere, but it's way too small to see. To fix it, there is a function that isn't in any of the menus. It's a developer tool, so officially it doesn't exist on Rhino. So type test curve, CRV, self intersection, and then hit enter. Suddenly a point appeared just here, and that point indicates exactly where our curves are self-intersecting. So I'm just going to pull out my zoomy tool here, and there it is. We're zoomed in to such an incredibly detailed extent that there's just no way you'd see this on the screen. I've selected the curve and exploded it. Now I'm selecting the curve that is the problem, splitting it with the curve that isn't a problem, hit enter, delete the problem curve, and there's actually two, and delete the point that Rhino was nice enough to leave there for me. So if I select all of the curves and deselect that point, which I'm going to need in a minute, join them, we've got a closed curve, and when I do a planar curve on it, it worked. So that means we've eliminated the self-intersection. Now I select the curve, my little point here, and the surface, move to perspective view, and you can see I've left myself a point on the body there, so I know how to align these two. When I've got my alignment, left click, I can delete both of those points because I don't need them anymore. So there's my update. Obviously Rhino is incredibly dense, and I'm hoping to bring you a lot more of these updates in the future as I learn more about the program. In the meantime, I've got lots of cool stuff coming up. I hope to see you then.